Coming up on today's show, I want to break down Daniel Jeremiah's top 150 draft prospects the week of the 2025 NFL Draft and look at some names that could make sense for Denver in rounds 1, 2, and 3. Now, quick plug here for rounds 1, 2, and 3, which we will be live for here on the channel. So if you are looking for free pick-by-pick analysis, make sure you click that sub button down below and come hang out with us for all of the NFL 2025 NFL Draft. Sorry about that. So let's look at some round 1 targets. At pick number 20, here are just 3 names I want on your radar. Omarion Hampton, UNC running back, Nick Emmanwori, safety out of South Carolina, and Derrick Harmon, defensive tackle from Oregon. And you can see where DJ had them ranked in his top 150. Let's go player by player for a moment here. I just want to go with more of a breadth, not depth approach to all of this because I think at this point we've all had draft overload of a million names being shoved down our throats. But Hampton is a big bruising back with some good speed to his game. He's not going to be an absolute burner when he gets to the second level or gets to open space, but back-to-back seasons with 15 touchdowns and now averaging nearly 6 yards a pop. He flashes some good receiving upside as well, nearly 40 receptions in 2024 and 373 yards. I am going to confidently say if he is available when Denver is on the clock, that will be the pick for the Broncos. So that's a little background on Hampton. However, there is a possibility he is not going to be there at 20. And if that's the case, here are my 2 backup options to keep an eye on. South Carolina safety Nick Emmanwori, 6'3", 220, 4.38 40-yard dash. From a pure physical trait standpoint, pound for pound, he is one of the best athletes in this class. But on top of that, he's not just a track star. He had great production last year in Columbia. First off, he was a freshman All-American and was a team's defensive MVP as a true freshman. But last year for the Gamecocks, 4 interceptions, including 2 pick sixes and 88 tackles. So Emmanwori checks a lot of boxes from a physical trait standpoint and from a production standpoint. So if you're looking at a pure best player available and you don't want to reach on a running back that you look at as a round 2 guy, you could go Emmanwori in round 1 and circle back to a running back in round 2. Now, let's say both those players we talked about are not there at 20. I'll toss out Derrick Harmon, Oregon defensive tackle. Sean Payton said during his press conference last week, this is a very deep running back and defensive tackle class. So the Oregon Duck, who transferred from Michigan State to Eugene for 1 season with Dan Lanning, put together a great season. He led all FBS interior defensive linemen with 55 pressures. So a breakout campaign after a quiet 3 seasons in East Lansing, where you can just see the huge jump he made from 2023 to 2024. It is not common to find 300 plus pound guys with 5 sacks. So if Denver wants to bring some youth to the trenches, Harmon or Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, I'll suggest as great options to do that. Another name, but I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole, Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. But for these 3 guys we looked at specifically today, how would you decide on who to pick? Would you go Hampton? Would you go Emmanwori? Would you go Harmon? For me, they go in this order, and that's kind of by design. That's how Daniel Jeremiah has them ranked. So I'd go Omarion Hampton, then sprinkle in Emmanwori as a potential Brandon Jones replacement in a year or 2. But either way, you'll get a really fun player on your defense. Fast forward to round 2 now. Here are 3 players I want to toss out there. Iowa State wide receiver Jayden Higgins, Iowa running back Kaleb Johnson, and Texas defensive tackle Alfred Collins. Let's begin with Higgins, who comes in at 46 on DJ's big board. He had a awesome time in Ames, Iowa after starting off at Eastern Kentucky. He really put together a great showcase in 2024. 6'4", 214 pounds, and ran a sub-4.5 40-yard dash. That is your quintessential height, weight, speed combination that teams are always searching for in receivers. I would not be surprised if Higgins snuck into the end of round 1. He is rising up people's big boards. Last year for the Cyclones, 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns. He doesn't have the flashy production over a long collegiate career. He doesn't have the flashy resume of an SEC wide receiver. He went from Eastern Kentucky to Iowa State. Let's be honest, you usually do not think of wide receivers when talking about Ames, Iowa. But Higgins is not someone to sleep on. So if Denver wants to go with the best player available in round 2, if they went Omarion Hampton in round 1, and they're like, you know what, let's go get the best guy out there in round 2, and they are shocked to find Higgins in the mid-50s, then move over Devon Vele and Marvin Mims. You have some competition coming your way. Now, if the Broncos fail to get a running back in round 1, I would love it if they could secure Kaleb Johnson, the Iowa back, in round 2. He is very similar to Omarion Hampton in a play style standpoint. They are big, bruising backs who seek contact. They want to run players over. They are not gadget scat backs. Now, he doesn't quite have the speed of Hampton, which is why, by most accounts, Omarion is number 2 on people's running back big boards, and Johnson comes in around 3 or 4. But to me, he still showcases a ton of potential. I mean, for starters, he was in an Iowa offense last year that ranked 130th out of 134th FBS teams in pass attempts. So, he went into every single game knowing they know that we're going to run it because we can't pass to save our lives. And despite that, he averaged over 6 yards a carry. I've heard everything I need to hear. Now, before we look at the other 4 players to keep an eye on per DJ's big board, I do want to give you guys a quick shout out to our friends over at Game Time. Game Time makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. So if you want to go to a Rockies game or a Nuggets game or an Avs game soon when they come back from Dallas, possibly, depending on when this airs and when you're watching, up 2-0, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. That third round 2 target, that could be a round 3 target, but I like him too much to risk him not being there in round 3. I'd be okay with a quote-unquote reach in round 2 with Texas's defensive tackle Alfred Collins. Look at the size. 6'6", 332 pounds. Now, there are some cons behind his profile, the biggest one being, what took so long? He was a big-time recruit for the Longhorns. He ends up being a backup for the first 4 years, which, hey, when T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy are on that defensive line, a round 1 and round 2 pick from last year's draft, there's only so many snaps that can go around. But come year 5, Alfred Collins showcased why he was a big-time get for Texas. 55 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 18 pressures. I know those numbers don't jump out at you like Derrick Harmon, but keep in mind he is carrying well over 320, 330 pounds. So with that big size comes some great run-stopping abilities, but also some awesome pass rush potential being flashed at times. I would love to see Collins work behind DJ Jones for a year or 2 and then take over as this team's true interior defensive tackle. Moving on to round 3 targets now, according to Jeremiah. Let's start with another Longhorn, and that is Andrew Mukuba, the Texas do-it-all DB. He comes over from Clemson, plays just one season in Austin, not the biggest guy in the field, 5'11", a buck 86, and all he did was just play like a tornado. He was flying all over the field, just causing problems everywhere he went. He's fast, he's physical, and he's violent. Plus, the guy's got some sneaky production. Look at what he did last year for the Longhorns. 12 pass breakups, 5 interceptions after just 1 in 3 years for Dabo Swinney, 4 tackles for loss, and tossing a forced fumble. Now, the lack of size and the 1-year breakout is going to cause him to fall down people's big boards. I would not mind this pick at all in round 3. You're going to add a versatile chess piece to your defense, someone who can move around, but it's probably just going to be a safety at the next level. His teammate, Jahdae Barron, is a little bit more versatile between outside, inside corner, and a little bit safety, but I love Mukuba in round 3 of the draft. The next guy I want to put on your radar is Florida State defensive tackle Joshua Farmer. 6'3", 305, so not as big as Alfred Collins or Derrick Harmon, and that's a reason why he's not looked as a round 1 to round 2 guy. He started 2 years for the Seminoles, playing that 2-eye/3 technique position. Shout out to Dane Brugler and the Beast. He puts out great content covering all these prospects, so appreciate you, Dane. And Farmer is I wouldn't say like a rotational. Well, no, we'll call it a rotational piece because that's what he's going to be at the next level. He was not last year for FSU, but when you get to the pros, you're not going to have the same kind of usage and role that you did in your final year at college. But 26 pressures, 4 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. Teams love to find interior guys who can get to the quarterback. And Farmer last year for Florida State was number 2 on the team in pressures. Now, the bar was not very high given how bad FSU was, but for round 3, yeah, that is someone that I think that's someone that teams are going to take a quick look at here. This next guy I want to look at, we'll check out his stats here. It is a wide receiver from Utah State, and that would be Jalen Royals. He was the only player in all of FBS last year with 70 or more receptions and 15 or more touchdowns. Sorry about the typo. He missed half of 2024 with a foot injury, so that's why his overall production, in 2023, he was the only player with those types of numbers. But in 2024, you don't get the same type of usage with only 55 grabs, 834 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Royals, though, is I wouldn't say a chess piece type receiver. He predominantly lined up out wide at the X position. So if he does turn into more of like a Z or Y receiver at the next level, it's going to require a little bit of patience and a little bit of development. But for round 3, if Denver decides to wait on a wide receiver, I think Royals could be a really good pick for Sean and George Payton. So that is my top 9 players for the Broncos in rounds 1, 2, and 3 based off of Daniel Jeremiah's big board. Name your draft sleeper. We'll wrap up the video with this right here. I will toss out Tennessee, no bias, defensive tackle, Omar Norman Lott. He, on average, snap for snap, was one of the most productive pass rushing defensive tackles, not just in this year's draft class, but in very recent draft classes. So I'll go with Tennessee DT Omar Norman Lott. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see everyone later.